everyone. And I think I'll talk for around 30 minutes. I wanted to offer in the brief time I have some ways of really grounding our ecological work, or it really could be any active work that we're doing to respond to the needs of the world. And I've entitled my presentation, Showing Up for the Planet, 6 core practices for those basically ecological activists. And this will be the structure of my presentation. These are 6 core practices. This is basically coming from the understanding that we need to be here for the long haul, and that there are going to be all sorts of ups and downs, difficult emotions, difficult experiences, challenges with any groups that we're part of, conflicts, and we need a skill set to really have us be there for the long haul. I remember doing a workshop. There was a conference on spiritual activism that was organized by Michael Lerner and Tikkun magazine. I was part of that, and I gave a training on what kind of, basically it was a workshop on what kind of training does a spiritual activist need. And I started by asking people, what are the characteristic issues that you have for yourself as a so-called spiritual activist? And a number of them said, just it's really difficult in groups, and we actually get on each other's case all the time, and it's just very difficult experiences, a lot of things which can lead pretty quickly to burnout. So these are 6 different ways of being there for the long haul. And in part, they identify core issues or concerns, but they're if we can really connect with these 6, I think we can much more likely be there for the long haul. So the first is a regular communion with the earth, with one's action coming out of a strong sense of communion and love. And I'll go over each of these. Secondly, building community and a sense of connection and practicing and acting in this context. Thirdly, really crucially, being skillful with difficult emotions, thoughts, body states related to the climate emergency, or it could be related to really anything that comes up, just our response to the news, our response to tensions or conflicts within the groups we're part of. Number 3, very central. Number 4, cultivating empathy and compassion and bringing these across boundaries of country, race, age, political views, and so forth. The 5th is staying connected with one's imagination, one's visionary capacity. And the 6th is finding one's own form of committed action and staying with it, whatever that is, and I'll come back to that and go into more detail actually on all of these. And in a way, these all help us to both sort of respond personally to challenges which come up, but in a way, they also prefigure a new world. And they go against many of the tendencies of the world that produces climate crisis. So for example, the loss of contact with the earth, the loss of contact with the land. And so having regular communion with the earth, so crucial. Also building community, so much connected with the contemporary world results in a loss of community and what sociologists call hyper-individualism. And so these have to be very conscious because they go against the dominant trends. Then being really skillful with one's own inner states, and particularly cultivating empathy and compassion, going against the tensions, again, so much of the powers that be are based in divide and conquer strategies that divide people, and we think of people as enemies. So empathy and compassion, so crucial. One of the most powerful writings I actually read yesterday following the not guilty verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial was by John A. Powell, which was really both talking about the, the structural issues and the many issues related to that verdict, but also guiding us in never forgetting empathy and compassion when there are these divides. He's the founder and director of the Othering and Belonging Institute, which does really beautiful work on issues, particularly of race and class and othering. It's actually based at the University of California, Berkeley. And then really continually having the vision that is necessary for imagining the new world, which is already here. Yeah, and then lastly, whatever one's work is, having some form of committed action that one stays with. So the first one probably goes without saying, but it can be really helpful to take this as a practice. And here I'm influenced a lot by the notion of spiritual practice, of something that one regularly does that keeps one connected, to one's vision, to one's ways of transforming inner and outer life. And so having a regular communion with the earth, and especially this is crucial for, again, going against a lot of the prevailing tendencies that cut us off from the earth, that even our very language does this. We talk about nature as if it's different from us. And so that kind of regular communion, really, really crucial. It doesn't have to be going to the wilds. It could be communion through one's gardening, through being with flowers, through being with the earth, through being with trees. I actually do a regular practice influenced by the Buddhist practice of called sympathetic joy, or mudita, of when I do a neighborhood walk around where I live, I actually connect with the trees and plants and bushes and do actually something like a traditional phrase, which is, may you continue to blossom, may you continue to be happy and healthy. And just doing that for 15 or 20 minutes on a walk with with trees and bushes, it's very happy state. And actually I've found that even doing that, I actually, believe it or not, have found myself offering similar wishes to automobiles, which is not usually what I would do. So anyway, so that regular communion, and this is especially important because the communion leads to a sense of connection and love. And I think very crucial for our action in the world is to have the action come out of love. So I wanted to just show some wonderful expressions of this notion. These are actually not from ecological activists so much. The last one will be, but of the importance of acting out of love. And so this is from a well-known author's work, basically showing all the interconnection of all the issues, right? And so I think that's, again, that's implied by what I'm presenting. And so here, this is from Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Vietnamese teacher. Again, these are going to be a few quotations. There's an earlier picture of Thich Nhat Hanh with Martin Luther King, I think around 1966 or 67. Nonviolent action, born of the awareness of suffering and nurtured by love, is the most effective way to confront adversity. And so these different expressions will let us see that sense of action out of love. This is from Dr. King. The end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of men. And John Lewis, when we were sitting in, it was love in action. When we went on the Freedom Ride, it was love in action. The march from Selma to Montgomery was love in action. We do it not simply because it's the right thing to do, but it's love in action. That we love our country, we love a democratic society, and so we have to move our feet. But I wanted also to give a passage. Let's see, this is from my colleague Tanisara, who was at Standing Rock. I think it's a very similar sentiment from one of the elders at Standing Rock, who was a water protector. He said, what should be remembered about Standing Rock is that it began with children calling us to pray with them, elders too. We must mean and do what we say. Fighting from violence disrespects the ancestors. The ancestors are fighting the battle also, and they need to be here without violence. You must pray for yourself, take out your pain, and have love put in your heart instead. As we unify with nature, she will heal us. Respect Mother Earth. So very similar views from these different approaches. That's really the first point, to act out of a sense of communion and to have that communion lead to love and have that be the basis of one's action. I also think of Cornel West's phrase. He says that justice is the public face of love. Some of you may know that one. And so secondly, really crucial, is building community and connections and doing one's action and practices coming out of a community context. You know, much like I think this group, having a small group that can be one's home base, that is so crucial. You know, and to have people one can bounce things off of, really be, really stay connected with others, to, again, go against the isolation. So again, one of the training programs that I was involved with for about 10 years, we created small groups of about 8 to 10 people and did training for those groups and had everything occur in a small group context with meetings once a week. In those training programs, we were combining inner work with social service and social action. And to be in the program, everyone had to have a form of action that they were engaged in. You know, people are doing different things from working with the homeless to working on environmental policy to to teaching conflict work to children, all sorts of things. And they were doing so, connecting the inner and the outer. And so I think having this very conscious intention to do one's work and have a community base for it is really, really crucial, really very, very necessary. And I think, in the long run, I think what's necessary, particularly, I think I mentioned this in my initial write-up for the climate crisis, is to have a very, very, large movement. But what I'm really stressing is the crucial nature of having that grounded in small communities for all sorts of reasons, to have people to support you, to bounce off of. So the conscious creation of small communities related to action, really, really crucial. A third emphasis, maybe goes without saying, is having, this is where spiritual practices come in, is having ways of working skillfully with difficult emotions, difficult thoughts or narratives, difficult body states, including trauma, and to have that be in one's repertoire and in the repertoire of one's community. Again, this is part of, I work especially with Buddhist forms of spiritual practice, and a large part of our work is becoming skillful with difficult states. And increasingly even work with trauma has been integrated into that. So this topic in itself could be the topic of the whole session, or a whole day, or 5 days, right? How do we train to be skillful with difficult emotions, and difficult thoughts, and difficult body states? So, we work a lot with mindfulness. We also work a lot with developing heart qualities like compassion, empathy, gratitude, and so forth. And to have a skill set, maybe this could be part of the discussion in terms of specific emotions, storylines, body states, on how to work with them. But this is very, very crucial. And I'll mention just a few things that I found helpful. Sort of a short list. I mentioned the importance of mindfulness, knowing something's happening. It's basically developing a toolkit of how to work with difficult emotions, thoughts, body states, and then having enough mindfulness to know that they're happening, which is easier said than done. And another, I'll just mention very briefly a few things that I have found particularly helpful. Also, knowing the level of intensity of what one's experiencing is really crucial, because some of our tools work when the level of intensity on a scale of 1 to 10 is like at a 6 or a 7, but they don't work at a level of 9 or 10. And so really being really clear about the level of intensity. And when it's a 9 or a 10, sometimes we just need to do something which brings us back to balance. And we can't use tools like mindfulness. That's one of the things that we learned when I went through the somatic experiencing 3-year training on trauma. And we had a number of people who were meditation teachers doing the training together. And people told stories of being at meditation retreats and being in the grips of trauma, and meditation teachers not informed about trauma when they were experiencing a level 9 or 10 told them, just stay with it, be mindful, right? And not good guidance, not well-informed guidance. So knowing the intensity level of what one's experiencing and having a tool that's appropriate for the intensity level, crucial point that's often not mentioned. Right, so that's, the fourth is, and this is, I'll go back to the slides. The fourth is the importance of empathy and compassion. This is from Otis Taylor. This was right at the peak of the last election. I argue that the lack of empathy is the most pressing issue in America, and it's more compelling than national security threats, bad trade deals, unpaid taxes, and deleted emails. And really pointing to, empathy is the tuning into another person's emotions and sense of what matters. And differentiated from compassion. Compassion can do that at times, but compassion often goes into the difficult experiences or the painful experiences, and also is more connected with action and response. But this notion of empathy is so missing now as things get polarized, and it's really, really crucial to do that. This is from Kat Zavis, who came in the recent book by Michael Lerner called Revolutionary Love. She talks about prophetic empathy, which is prophetic insofar as it challenges the aspects of the systems that produce hatred, sexism, racism, classism, and environmental irresponsibility, and also in calling people back to their highest selves. Prophetic empathy insists on listening to others with an open, compassionate heart and with genuine curiosity about their life experiences and feelings, and helping them articulate their deepest needs while powerfully advocating for a loving world. Prophetic empathy affirms the humanity of all people. It recognizes that people can be oppressors and oppressed at the same time. And in fact, most of us in Western societies are in that situation. So again, there are ways of developing empathy. I actually teach retreats on mindful communication and wise speech. And maybe if we have time, I can teach a very simple empathy practice that is a wonderful form of spiritual practice, and can say more. Empathy is a little bit complicated topic because it's it needs a little more application, development. But basically, what I'm suggesting is the importance of being able to not shut down one's heart and not shut down one's communication with people with different views. You know, and I think of experiences like I was once part of a kind of a retreat / demonstration at the Los Alamos National Laboratory related to nuclear weapons. We had a group, it was an interfaith program. We had about 30 people, and we were at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and you know, it was interfaith. We were meditating half the day, and then we'd also interact with people. We had lunch every day in the cafeteria, and would talk with the scientists and technicians. And it was interesting. Some of our group really quickly got into arguments with them, and some of our group tried to be empathic and really hear, oh, why are you building nuclear weapons? What's in your mind? And it was interesting to really be practicing empathy in that kind of context and be listening. And I think it's so crucial, you know, and I could have an analysis which goes a lot further with that, in terms of, I'm very influenced by the work of, do people know the work of Ian Haney Lopez? He wrote a book, he's written a few books. He's a law professor at University of California, Berkeley, whose specialization is the area of race and law. And he did a book, sort of classic book on dog whistle politics. But more recently, he wrote a book called Merge Left, which is making the point very strongly that for there really to be any movement, there has to be a strong connection of issues of race with issues of economics and class. And that if you just focus on race, you'll get the progressives, but you'll lose much of the country. And so what that requires is, you know, empathy with the so-called, you know, white working class, who most of whom voted for Obama, but they've shifted, right? So anyway, there's a whole point there for the importance of empathy and compassion and going across lines. Okay, so here's the next one. This is where I'll ask for some writing. Okay, so this is about the importance of the imagination and the kind of the part of ourselves that knows that change is possible. And we have also parts of ourselves that get depressed or pessimistic and so forth. So the last point is to find your own form of committed action and stay with it. And I'm thinking there's a beautiful story of Howard Thurman, who was an African-American mystic, activist, theologian, and taught at Howard University, Boston University for a long time, a lot of wonderful work. Came out to San Francisco, I think in the 40s and 50s, and helped set up one of the first interracial churches in the Bay Area. And towards the end of his life, he died in 1980. In the 70s, I think a young man came to him and said, I'm confused, what should I do? And you know, Howard Thurman was an activist. You might think of him saying, you know, we have all this need at our church, here, do this, do that. And he said, this was his answer, don't ask what the world needs. Pretty striking, right? That was his first response. Don't ask what the world needs, but ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Whoa. Interesting. And so that's what I want to suggest as the last point. Find your own form of action, not because you think it's the right thing to do, but because it really calls you. And let me do the last of the screen share here. Just a few things. This is from beloved teacher and elder Joanna Macy, who's a neighbor of mine out here. And she says that there are 3 forms of action that lead to a life-sustaining society. The first is more the usual province of activism, holding actions to hold back and slow down the damage, saying no. Secondly, analyzing institutions and creating new institutions that are life-sustaining. That could be with, economic institutions or educational institutions, different ways of parenting, all sorts of things. Thirdly, transforming and shifting consciousness towards a sense of caring, compassion, and interdependence. And the key here is that all three are interrelated. And so we may have most of our activity be in one or two or three, but the key is to know that these are all closely connected. And I'll close with two passages. This is from Vandana Shiva. Many of you know her. This much I know, I do not allow myself to be overcome by hopelessness, no matter how tough the situation. I believe that if you just do your little bit without thinking of the bigness of what you stand against, if you turn to the enlargement of your own capacities, just that in itself creates new potential. And I've learned from the Bhagavad Gita and other teachings of our culture to detach myself from the results of what I do, because these are not in my hands. The context is not in your control, but your commitment is yours to make. And you can make the deepest commitment with a total detachment about where it will take you. You want it to lead to a better world, and you shape your actions and take full responsibility for them, but then you have the detachment. And that combination of deep passion and deep detachment allows me always to take on the next challenge, because I don't cripple myself. I don't tie myself in knots. I function like a free being. I think getting that freedom is a social duty. I think we owe it to each other not to burden each other with prescription and demands. What we owe each other is a celebration of life, and to replace fear and hopelessness with fearlessness and joy. Whoa. And then I'll close again with Joanna Macy. As humans, we are called to meet courageously what is obstructing our path. That gives us energy. When we meet the challenges in front of us, may they be illness, climate crisis, danger to our democracy, or to vulnerable fellow humans, we become discerning, eloquent, courageous, and able to hold our heads up. So that's the last point, is that find one's own form of action and stay with it.